The noble princess was disabled and could not have children. But after marrying her, the man changed asterisk. The great council chamber of Zephyros Prime was silent. For the first time in 1,000 years, the most powerful beings in the galaxy had no words to speak. They sat around the massive crystal table, their pale blue skin showing the deep worry lines that marked their ancient faces. Chancellor Vex looked at the medical reports spread before him. The numbers told a terrible story. 0 births in the last 50 years. 0 successful pregnancies in the royal bloodline. 0 hope for the future of their empire. "We are dying," he said quietly. His voice echoed in the empty chamber. "Not from war, not from disease. We are simply ending." The Zephyrian people had ruled the eastern galaxy for 10,000 years. They were smart, peaceful, and strong. Their technology was far beyond most other species. They could travel between stars in days, not years. They could cure diseases that killed other races. They could build cities that floated in space like jewels. But they could not have children. The genetic plague had started slowly. At first, only a few families had trouble having babies. Scientists said it would pass. They were wrong. Each year, fewer children were born. Each year, more families ended forever. Only one person remained who could continue the royal bloodline. Princess Lirelei, daughter of the late emperor, last hope of her people, and she was broken. The princess sat in her floating chair, watching the city below through the palace windows. The chair moved without sound, controlled by her thoughts. Through the neural implant behind her ear, she had not walked since birth. The same genetic damage that made her people sterile had also damaged her spine and reproductive system. She was 28 years old. In human terms, she would be considered beautiful. Her silver hair fell like water down her shoulders. Her eyes were the deep purple of Zephyrian nobility. Her mind was sharp enough to cut diamond. Would never carry her, and her body would never create life. "Princess," her aide Kren approached carefully. "The council wishes to speak with you." Lirelei turned her chair away from the window. "Let me guess. Another doctor who thinks he can fix what cannot be fixed." "No, my lady. Something ... different." In the council chamber, Lirelei listened to the most desperate plan in Zephyrian history. "Marriage?" she asked. "To an alien? To a human?" Chancellor Vex explained. "The Earth people have agreed to consider a diplomatic union. They would send one of their people to marry you. In return, we would share our hyperspace technology with them." Lirelei almost laughed. "And what good would that do? I cannot have children with a Zephyrian. How could I possibly have children with a completely different species?" We do not know," the Chancellor admitted. "But we must try something. The alternative is the end of everything we have built." The council showed her files about humans. They were a young species only recently reaching the stars. Their technology was simple compared to Zephyrian science. They lived short lives and fought many wars. But they had one thing the Zephyrians envied. They reproduced easily and often. "They are so different from us," Lirelei said, looking at images of humans. They had strange, warm colors instead of the cool blues and silvers of her people. Their faces showed emotions openly. They seemed almost wild compared to the controlled Zephyrian way of life. "The Earth Federation has agreed to send volunteers," Vex continued. "They will choose someone suitable for a diplomatic marriage." "Volunteers," Lirelei repeated, "to marry a disabled princess from a dying race? How wonderful for them." 3 weeks later, on Earth, Dr. Marcus Chen read the same files in his small apartment. The Earth Federation had asked for volunteers for what they called the most important diplomatic mission in human history. Most people thought it was impossible. Some thought it was a joke. Marcus was 32 years old, an expert in alien biology and former military doctor. He had spent 5 years studying Zephyrian medical records that had been shared with Earth. He knew more about their genetic problems than most Zephyrian doctors did. He also knew that this marriage was being called a symbolic gesture by the press. Everyone expected the princess and her human husband to live quietly, while Zephyrian scientists kept looking for real solutions. Marcus thought they were all wrong. That night, he sent his application to the Federation. "Why?" his friend Sarah asked when he told her. This is basically a death sentence for any children you might want to have. Even if the marriage somehow works, any kids would be impossible hybrids. Marcus looked out at the stars. Maybe humans have something the Zephyrians need. We survived ice ages, plagues, radiation, wars. We adapt. They evolved in perfect conditions and never learned how to change. So you think you can save an entire alien species? I think someone has to try. 6 weeks later, Marcus stood in the shuttle bay of the Earth Federation ship Endeavor. He was one of 5 final candidates, but the Zephyrians had chosen him. After reviewing his medical background and research proposals, the other candidates had focused on diplomacy and politics. Marcus had submitted a research plan for genetic compatibility studies. While others talked about symbolic marriages, he talked about real solutions. As the shuttle prepared for the jump to hyperspace, Marcus read Princess Lyralei's personal file one more time. The Zephyrians had included everything: her medical history, her education, her interests. What struck him most was not her disabilities, but her intelligence. She had 3 degrees in biological sciences. She had published research papers on cross-species genetics. She had built and ran her own laboratory despite her physical limitations. This was not a helpless princess waiting to be saved. This was a scientist who understood her people's problem better than anyone. The shuttle jumped to hyperspace, carrying Marcus toward a wedding that would either save 2 species or destroy them both. On Zephyros Prime, Princess Lyralei waited in her tower laboratory. Around her, robot assistants moved samples and ran tests under her mental control. She had spent years trying to solve the genetic puzzle that was killing her people. Soon, she would have a human to study. Perhaps, if she was very lucky and very smart, she could find the answer in his strange, adaptable DNA. The fate of 2 worlds now rested on a marriage between a disabled princess and a human doctor who believed the impossible could become possible. Neither of them knew that they were about to change not just their own lives, but the future of the entire galaxy. The shuttle landed on Zephyros Prime with barely a whisper. Marcus looked out at his new home through the small window. The capital city stretched before him like a dream made of crystal and light. Tall spires twisted into the purple sky, connected by bridges that glowed with soft energy. Flying vehicles moved between the buildings like schools of silver fish. It was beautiful. It was also completely alien. Dr. Chen, said Ambassador Kren, who had come to meet him. Prime, I hope your journey was comfortable. Marcus shouldered his bag. Thank you. I'm ready to meet the princess. Kren's expression became careful. The princess is not what you might expect from Earth stories. I've read her files. I know about her condition. Her condition, yes. But perhaps not her personality. They traveled through the city in a silent transport. Marcus watched the Zephyrian people through the windows. They moved with grace, their pale blue skin and silver hair making them look like living statues. But he noticed something else. There were no children. Anywhere. The palace rose before them like a mountain of white stone and blue crystal. Inside, everything was smooth and curved. The walls seemed to glow with their own light. Robot servants moved through the halls, tending to tasks with perfect precision. The princess will receive you in her laboratory, Kren explained. Not the throne room? The princess spends most of her time in the laboratory. She is ... very dedicated to her research. They entered a vast room filled with equipment Marcus had never seen before. Holographic displays showed complex molecular structures. Robot arms moved samples between different machines. And in the center of it all, in her floating chair, was Princess Lyralei. She was smaller than Marcus had expected, but her presence filled the room. Her purple eyes studied him with the sharp focus of a scientist examining a new specimen. Dr. Chen, she said. Her voice was clear and strong. I have read your research proposals. They're either brilliant or completely insane. Marcus smiled. In my experience, the best science is usually both. For the first time since he had arrived, Lyralei smiled back. Indeed. Come, let me show you what we have learned about our genetic problems. For the next 3 hours, Marcus forgot he was on an alien world. Lyralei guided him through decades of research. showing him genetic maps, failed experiments, and theories. That had led nowhere. She controlled everything with her mind through the neural implant, making robots dance around them, as she explained. Your scientists approach this like engineers, Marcus said finally. Very precise, very controlled. But evolution is messy. Life finds ways to survive that don't make sense. Explain. Marcus pulled up Earth's genetic databases on his portable computer. Look at this. Humans carry DNA from viruses that tried to kill our ancestors millions of years ago, but instead of dying, we made that viral DNA part of ourselves. It's why we can adapt so quickly. Leerle stared at the data. This is ... chaos. This is survival. Over the following weeks, they worked together every day. Marcus taught Leerle about human approaches to genetic problems. She showed him Zephyrian precision techniques that could modify DNA one molecule at a time.
Ow.
Slowly, they began to develop new ideas. But not everyone was happy with their work. The human corrupts our princess with his primitive ideas, Lord Varric whispered to his allies in the council. He fills her head with dangerous thoughts about mixing our pure genetics with alien contamination. Lord Varric was old, even by Zephyrian standards. He remembered when their empire was at its greatest power. He believed that mixing with aliens would destroy everything they had built. The princess has always been difficult, agreed Lady Nira. But this human makes her worse. She speaks of changing our most sacred medical traditions. Then, perhaps, Varric said quietly, the human should meet with an accident. Marcus learned about Zephyrian politics the hard way. The first assassination attempt came as he walked through the palace gardens. A maintenance robot suddenly turned and fired an energy beam that missed his head by inches. His military training saved him. Marcus rolled behind a statue and called for help. Palace guards arrived quickly, but the robot had already been destroyed by a self-destruct program. Who would want to kill me? Marcus asked. Leerle later. Those who fear change. She answered. There are many in the council who believe that purity is more important than survival. The second attempt was more clever. Someone poisoned his food with a toxin that was harmless to Zephyrians but deadly to humans. Only Marcus's habit of scanning. Everything he ate with his medical equipment saved his life. They will not stop, Leerle warned him. Some of my people would rather see our species die than accept help from aliens. And we'd better work faster, Marcus replied. Despite the danger, their research continued. Something else grew. Between them, Marcus found himself looking forward to their daily conversations. Leerle laughed at his jokes about human stubbornness. When she explained complex theories, her eyes lit up with passion that made her more beautiful than any royal portrait. You don't see me as broken, she said one evening as they watched the sunset from her laboratory windows. I see you as the smartest person I've ever met, Marcus answered honestly, even though I cannot walk, cannot bear children. Marcus turned to face her. I see someone who has spent her life trying to save her people. That's not broken. That's heroic. The wedding was set for the spring season. But 3 days before the ceremony, Lord Varric made his final move. Armed soldiers surrounded the laboratory while Marcus and Leerle worked. By order of the Traditional Council, Varric announced, the human will be removed from Zephyros Prime. For the corruption of royal blood, Marcus stepped in front of Leerle's chair. You'll have to go through me first. That can be arranged. The fight that followed became legend. Marcus used every dirty trick he had learned in Earth's military. He turned the laboratory's equipment into weapons, using acid sprays and laser cutters to hold off the soldiers. Leerle controlled her robot assistants like an army, creating barriers and distractions. Together, they held the laboratory until loyal palace guards arrived. Lord Varric was arrested, but not before half the council declared support for his actions. The wedding will proceed, Chancellor Vex announced the next day, but security will be ... extensive. On the day of the ceremony, Marcus stood in the great hall, wearing formal Zephyrian robes that felt strange on his human body. Leerle approached in her chair, dressed in silver and blue, that made her look like starlight itself. The ceremony was beautiful and tense. Half the guests smiled and wished them well. The other half watched with cold eyes that promised future trouble. As they exchanged vows in both languages, Marcus realized something important. This marriage had started as a desperate political move. But somewhere between dodging assassins and sharing late-night research sessions, it had become real. Lirelei spoke her vows. Her voice was steady and strong. "I take you not just as my husband, but as my partner in the work that matters most." Marcus replied, "I promise to stand with you, to change what can be changed, and to never give up hope." As they kissed to seal their marriage, neither of them knew that their real work was just beginning. But for the first time since arriving on Zephyros Prime, Marcus felt truly hopeful. They had found each other. Now they had to save two worlds. Marcus sat in the laboratory at 3 in the morning, staring at data that should not exist. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he did not notice. The genetic comparison charts on the holographic display told an impossible story. For weeks, he had been comparing human DNA with Zephyrian samples. The two species were so different that most scientists said mixing them was like trying to combine oil and water. But Marcus had found something the others had missed: computer highlight. "Repair sequences in human genetic code," he whispered. The display changed, showing bright yellow markers scattered throughout the human DNA pattern. There were thousands of them. Small pieces of genetic code that fixed damage, fought disease, and helped cells survive in terrible conditions. Now compare with Zephyrian genetic code. The Zephyrian pattern appeared next to the human one. It was beautiful, perfect, and organized like a work of art, but there were almost no yellow markers. The Zephyrians had very few repair sequences. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. The Zephyrians had evolved on a perfect world. No ice ages, no radiation, no deadly diseases. Their planet had protected them so well that they never needed to develop the genetic tools that humans took for granted. But humans had survived everything: ice ages that should have killed them, radiation that should have destroyed their DNA, diseases that should have ended their species. Each time, the survivors passed on better repair codes to their children. "That's it," Marcus breathed. "That's the answer." He worked through the night, building computer models that showed how human repair sequences might work in Zephyrian cells. The theory was wild, but the math was solid. If he could somehow introduce human genetic repair codes into Zephyrian DNA, it might fix the damage that was making them sterile. When Lirelei arrived in the morning, she found Marcus surrounded by empty coffee cups and holographic displays. "You look terrible," she said, but her eyes were already studying his work. "Look at this," Marcus said excitedly. He showed her the comparison charts. "Your people are dying because you're too perfect. You never learned how to fix genetic damage because you never needed to." Lirelei studied the data for a long time. "This is ... actually possible," she said slowly. "But how would you introduce human repair sequences into Zephyrian cells? They would be rejected as foreign material." Marcus pulled up another display. Not if the human DNA was modified first. If someone underwent genetic transformation to become partially compatible with Zephyrian biology, their cells could carry the repair codes into Zephyrian systems. "Modified how?" Lirelei asked, though Marcus could see she was already understanding. Someone would have to volunteer to have their DNA permanently changed. They would become a hybrid, not fully human anymore, but able to share genetic material with Zephyrians. They stared at each other across the laboratory. Both of them knew who that volunteer would have to be. "It's too dangerous," Lirelei said firmly. "The transformation process could kill you. And even if it worked, you could never go back to being fully human. But it might save your people. I won't let you sacrifice yourself for a theory." Marcus took her hands gently. "It's not just a theory anymore. I've run the models 100 times. Science is solid." For 3 days, they argued. Lirelei showed him every way the plan could fail. Marcus showed her every reason why they had to try. Finally, she agreed to help him, but only if they could test the process in stages. They began working in secret. During the day, they continued their regular research. At night, they prepared for the most dangerous experiment in galactic history. The first step was growing human cells that had been modified with Zephyrian genetic markers. Marcus had to give blood samples every day for 2 weeks. Lirelei used her most advanced equipment to change his cells one piece at a time. The initial compatibility tests are promising, she reported after the first week. Your modified cells can survive in a Zephyrian environment? Good. Now we test them on live tissue. They started with small samples of Marcus's skin. The modified cells were injected into Zephyrian tissue samples in laboratory dishes. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the human repair sequences began working. Dead Zephyrian cells started regenerating. It works, Leroy whispered. Staring at the results, the human DNA is actually fixing our genetic damage. But laboratory dishes were very different from living bodies. For the real test, Marcus would have to undergo partial genetic transformation himself. Are you sure about this? Leroy asked as they prepared the transformation chamber. It looked like a medical pod surrounded by complex machinery. I've never been more sure of anything, Marcus replied. The transformation took place over 3 days. Marcus lay in the chamber, while machines slowly changed his DNA. The process was more painful than anything he had ever experienced. His cells fought against the changes, then slowly accepted them. His body temperature swung between fever and freezing. His heart stopped twice and had to be restarted. Leroy stayed with him the entire time, monitoring every vital sign, adjusting the process when his body showed signs of rejection. She barely slept, surviving on caffeine pills and determination. On the second day, Marcus's hair began changing. Color, turning from brown to a silver blue. Skin became slightly pale. His eyes developed flecks of purple. The changes were small, but they meant the transformation was working. DNA integration at 60%, Leroy reported. Pathways adapting to Zephyrian biological markers. Marcus could feel the changes happening. His thoughts seemed clearer, faster. He could sense the laboratory equipment around him in ways he never had before. The Zephyrian neural interface technology was starting to work with his modified brain. On the third day, the transformation stabilized. Marcus emerged from the chamber, looking mostly human, but with subtle changes that marked him as something new. Something that had never existed before. How do you feel? Leroy asked. Marcus concentrated, and one of her robot assistants moved across the room. He had controlled it with his thoughts, just like a Zephyrian. Different, he said, but alive. Now came the real test. Using his transformed cells, they created a treatment for Leroy's condition. The process required injecting Marcus's modified stem cells directly into her damaged neural pathways and reproductive system. If this doesn't work, ... double quotes Leroy began. Or work, Marcus said firmly. Trust the science. Trust us, was the treatment. Took 6 hours. Marcus's hybrid cells were carefully placed in the damaged areas of Leroy's body. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then slowly, the human repair sequences began their work. Leroy's neural pathways started regenerating. The damage in her spine began healing. Her reproductive system showed signs of returning function. For the first time in her life, sensation returned to her legs. Marcus, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I can feel my feet. He knelt beside her chair and took her hands. Can you move them? Slowly. Carefully, Leroy moved her toes. Then her feet. Then, with Marcus supporting her, she stood up from her chair for the first time in 28 years. They held each other in the empty laboratory to people who had just changed the future of the galaxy. We did it, Marcus said softly. Actually did it. But their celebration was brief. Outside the laboratory, alarms began sounding. Someone had discovered their secret research, and they were not happy about it. The alarms screamed through the palace halls like wounded animals. Marcus helped Leroy back into her chair, though she could now walk. They both knew she would need time to fully recover her strength. Security breach in Royal Laboratory 7. Announced the computer system. Unauthorized genetic experimentation detected. How did they find out? Marcus asked, checking the laboratory's security systems. Leroy's face was grim. Someone has been watching us. The question is whether they are friend or enemy. Their answer came quickly. The laboratory doors burst open, and Chancellor Vex rushed in, followed by 6 palace guards. His face showed a mixture of excitement and fear. Princess, Dr. Chen, you must come with us immediately, he said. The news of your success has spread beyond the palace. What news? Lirelei asked, though she was already rising from her chair to stand on her own legs. Vex stared at her in amazement. That news, Princess, you were standing? The report said it was impossible. But how did reports get out? Marcus demanded. We told no one. Laboratory computers are monitored, Vex explained quickly. When your genetic modification succeeded, automatic systems sent alerts to the medical council. By now, every scientist on Zephyros Prime knows what you have accomplished. Through the laboratory windows, they could see crowds gathering in the city streets. Even from this distance, Marcus could tell the crowds were angry. Some of our people are celebrating, Vex continued. They see this as the salvation of our species. But others see it as contamination, Lirelei finished. How bad is it? Lord Varek's supporters have declared the treatment illegal. They say mixing human DNA with Zephyrian genetics is an abomination. General Thane has moved military units to support them. Marcus felt something strange happening in his mind. Laboratory equipment around him seemed to pulse with energy he could sense but not quite understand. His transformation was still changing him in ways they had not expected. We need to get you both to a secure location, Vex said. No, Lirelei said firmly. We need to get to the communication center. If our people are divided, they need to hear the truth from us. But before they could move, the laboratory shook with the impact of energy weapons. Through the windows, they saw military aircrafts approaching the palace. General Thane's forces, Vex said in despair. They mean to stop the treatment by any means necessary. The palace defense systems activated, creating energy shields around the building. But Marcus could see it would not be enough. The attacking force was too large. Chancellor, get word to Earth, Marcus said quickly. Tell them what we have accomplished, and tell them what is happening here, and where will you be? Marcus looked at Lirelei, who was testing her newly healed legs by walking across the laboratory. We're going to defend our work. What followed was unlike any battle in Zephyrian history. The attackers expected to face traditional palace guards using standard tactics. Instead, they found themselves fighting Marcus Chen, who had learned warfare in Earth's brutal conflicts, and Princess Lirelei, who controlled the palace's automated systems like extensions of her own body. Marcus used every dirty trick he had. Learned as a human soldier, he booby-trapped doorways with laboratory chemicals that created blinding smoke. He turned maintenance robots into explosive devices. He used the palace's own air conditioning system to spread sleeping gas through enemy-held areas. Meanwhile, Lirelei discovered that her neural implant now worked even better than before. Marcus's genetic modifications had enhanced her brain's ability to interface with technology. She could control dozens of robots at once, turning the palace's service systems into an army. Cover the north corridor, Marcus called out as he prepared. Another improvised weapon. Already done, Lirelei replied. A dozen cleaning robots rolled into position, their chemical sprayers modified to shoot acid instead of soap. But the strangest discovery came when Marcus tried to interface with a damaged Zephyrian biocomputer. Instead of rejecting him as an incompatible alien, the machine responded to his touch. His hybrid nature allowed him to connect with Zephyrian technology in ways no pure human could. Lirelei, look at this, he called out during a brief pause. In the fighting, she came over to find Marcus with his hand placed on the biocomputer's interface panel. The machine was responding to him directly, without any neural implant. That should be impossible, she breathed. A lot of impossible. Things have been happening lately, Marcus replied. Through the biocomputer, he could sense the entire palace network. I can see everything, security cameras, defense systems, even the attackers' communication channels. Using this new ability, Marcus and Lirelei turned the tide of the battle. They could predict the attackers' movements, redirect their communications, and even take control of their equipment remotely. As they fought, news of the conflict spread across the galaxy. The Earth Federation received Chancellor Vex's message and immediately sent a diplomatic fleet toward Zephyros Prime. But more surprisingly, other alien species began sending their own messages. The Krellin Empire, which had been suffering from a genetic weakness that made their children small and frail, requested information about human genetic repair techniques. The Vanth Collective, whose people were slowly losing their natural telepathic abilities, asked if human DNA might help restore what they had lost. Even the proud Zarian Assembly, which had never before asked for help from anyone, sent a quiet inquiry about whether human adaptability could solve their problems with radiation poisoning. "Hey, do you understand what this means?" Leerily asked as they caught their breath between attacks. Marcus nodded. "We're not just saving your people, we're offering hope to the entire galaxy." The realization made them fight even harder. This was no longer just about their marriage, or even the Zephyrian Empire. They were defending the future of countless species. By the time Earth Federation ships arrived in orbit, the palace battle was over. Marcus and Leerale had successfully defended their laboratory, though large parts of the palace were damaged. General Thane's forces had retreated, but not before declaring the formation of a separate government that rejected any genetic mixing with alien species. "So we have civil war," Leerale said sadly, as they watched news reports of fighting in distant cities. "We have growing pains," Marcus corrected. "Every major change brings conflict. But look at what else is happening." He showed her messages from other planets. Hundreds of alien scientists were requesting information about human genetic techniques. Earth medical ships were already preparing to visit worlds that had previously refused any human contact. "Your transformation didn't just save my life," Leerale realized. "It opened a door between species that can never be closed again." Marcus felt the biocomputer networks across the planet humming with new information. His hybrid nature was allowing him to process and understand data in ways that amazed even him. "The hard part is just beginning," he said. "But we proved that humans and Zephyrians can work together, and we need to prove it to the rest of the galaxy." Outside their laboratory, the stars were filled with ships from a dozen worlds, all coming to learn about the miracle that had begun with a diplomatic marriage and become something that would change the universe forever. The revolution had begun. 6 months after the battle for the palace, Princess Leerale stood before the Grand Assembly of Zephyros Prime. The Great Hall was filled with representatives from across the galaxy. Humans sat next to Zephyrians. Krellin diplomats talked quietly. With Vanth telepaths, even the proud Zerians had sent observers. But all eyes were focused on the princess, who no longer needed her floating chair. She stood tall and strong, her hand resting on her growing belly. "My fellow Zephyrians," she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "I stand before you today not just as your princess, but as proof that change brings hope, not destruction." The hall was completely silent. For 3 centuries, no royal announcement had spoken of new life. "I am pregnant," Leerale announced. "The first royal child to be conceived in over 300 years. The first hybrid child in galactic history." The explosion of sound was immediate. Some delegates cheered and wept with joy. Others sat in stunned silence. A few traditionalists walked out in protest, but they were vastly outnumbered by those who remained. Marcus watched from beside her, his own transformation now complete. His appearance had stabilized into something truly unique, clearly human in origin.
Ow.
But with the silver blue hair and purple flecked eyes that marked his integration with Zephyrian genetics. More importantly, his mind could now interface directly with both human and Zephyrian technology. "The child will be born in 4 months," Leerale continued. "And with this birth, a new age begins for all our peoples." General Thane's rebellion had lasted only 2 months after that announcement, when word spread that the princess was carrying the first royal heir in centuries. Support for the traditionalist cause collapsed overnight. Even Thane's own soldiers began deserting to join the royal forces. The general himself surrendered when Earth Federation medical ships arrived with treatments for genetic diseases that had plagued his own family for generations. His youngest daughter, dying from a condition Zephyrian medicine could not cure, was saved by human genetic repair techniques. "I was wrong," Thane admitted during his surrender ceremony. "I thought mixing our genetics would weaken us. Instead, it has made us stronger than we ever dreamed possible." The Civil War ended not with violence, but with hope. Now, as Leerale's pregnancy progressed, the entire galaxy watched with fascination. Medical teams from dozens of species monitored the development of the first hybrid child. What they discovered amazed everyone. The baby shows remarkable genetic stability, reported Dr. Sarah Kim, who had come from Earth to assist with the pregnancy. Instead of the problems we expected from mixing two species, the child appears to have inherited the best traits from both parents. Marcus studied the genetic scans with wonder. His child would have the enhanced intelligence and technological interface abilities of the Zephyrians, combined with the genetic repair capabilities and adaptability of humans. But more than that, the baby seemed to have developed entirely new capabilities that neither species possessed alone. "Look at these neural pathway formations," he told Lirelei, as they reviewed the latest medical reports. "The baby's brain is developing connections we've never seen before." "What kind of connections?" "I think our child will be able to interface with technology from any species, not just humans and Zephyrians, and these genetic markers suggest immunity to diseases that affect both our peoples." When Princess Lirelei finally gave birth, the entire galaxy held its breath. The delivery was broadcast live to medical centers on hundreds of worlds. Scientists, doctors, and leaders watched as the first hybrid child in galactic history entered the universe. The baby was beautiful. She had her mother's purple eyes and her father's warm skin tone. Her hair was a unique silver gold that had never been seen before. But most remarkably, when the medical equipment was brought near her, the machines responded to her presence even though she was only minutes old. "She's interfacing with the bioscanners," Dr. Kim said in amazement. "Without any implants or training, it's like she was born knowing how to communicate with technology." They named her Alina, which meant bright light in the Old Earth language. As she grew over the following months, it became clear that Alina was indeed something entirely new. By her first birthday, Alina could control simple machines with her thoughts. By her second birthday, she was learning to speak in 3 languages simultaneously: human English, Zephyrian formal speech, and the mathematical language that computers used. She seemed to understand concepts that took most people years to learn. But more importantly, Alina was healthy, happy, and growing stronger every day. Her existence proved that not only could humans and Zephyrians successfully reproduce together, but their children would be more capable than either species alone. The impact on galactic civilization was immediate and profound. The Krellin Empire became the first to formally request human genetic assistance. Within a year, hybrid Krillin human children were being born with enhanced physical strength and intelligence. The Vanth Collective followed, and their hybrid children developed telepathic abilities that surpassed anything seen before. Once considered a minor player in galactic politics, suddenly found itself at the center of a new form of diplomacy. Instead of conquering other worlds, humans were being invited to save them. Marcus and Lirelei established the Interspecies Medical Institute in the rebuilt sections of the palace. The facility became a center of learning where doctors and scientists from across the galaxy worked together to solve genetic problems that had seemed impossible. Just years before, we've received applications from 47 different species, Lirelei reported during one of their planning meetings. "Everyone wants to learn about human genetic techniques. We're learning from them too," Marcus added. "Zarian radiation therapy, Vanth mental enhancement techniques, Krellin strength augmentation. We're not just sharing human abilities, we're creating something completely new." The Institute's success led to the formation of the Galactic Medical Alliance, the first truly cooperative organization in known history. Species that had been enemies for centuries now worked side by side to heal genetic damage and create healthier futures for their children. 5 years after their wedding, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the Institute, watching ships from dozens of worlds come and go. Lena played nearby, effortlessly controlling a dozen different alien toys with her mind while chatting with visiting scientists in their native languages. "Do you ever regret it?" Lirelei asked, joining him. "At the window, giving up your humanity to become something new." Marcus thought about the question seriously. He was no longer fully human. His DNA had been permanently altered. His appearance changed, his abilities expanded beyond anything a normal human could imagine. Now, he could never go back to being what he was before. "I didn't give up my humanity," he said finally. "I expanded it." Everything that made me human, the willingness to adapt, to sacrifice for others, to keep trying when things seem impossible, all of that is still here. It's just ... more now. Lena looked up at her parents and smiled. In her eyes, Marcus could see the future of the galaxy. Not human, not Zephyrian, but something wonderful and new that combined the best of many worlds. Besides, he added, picking up his daughter, look what we created. Not just Alina, but this whole new way of thinking about species and cooperation. Humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy wasn't our technology or our military power. It was our ability to change, to grow, to become something better than what we started as. Through the observation deck windows, the stars shone with the lights of 1,000 worlds now working together. The age of isolated species was ending. The age of cooperation, adaptation, and hybrid vigor was just beginning. And at the center of it all was a simple truth that Marcus had learned during his time as a military doctor. Sometimes the best way to save lives is to be willing to change everything about yourself. The revolution that had started with a desperate diplomatic marriage had become the foundation for a new kind of galactic civilization, one where differences were not barriers to overcome, but gifts to be shared. The future had never looked brighter.